What's up, YouTube, and welcome back to TPT. My name is Photoshooty, and I'm here with Necro. What's up, Nec?
Hey, what's up? I'm
Uh,
good.
we wanted to talk about the tournament really quickly, about all the top decks, which we can expect. If you guys wanna play in the tournament or just watch the stream. Uh, Besides that, we're gonna go over all the relevant cards for this format and all the side deck cards that we think are going to be very good in the tournament, or maybe some cards which we think should be played in the tournament. So yeah, let's start with the first deck, Necro. Do you know what this is? It's
Yes, this is the big boogeyman, I guess. It's plants and it's very good. It's very powerful. It has two game plans, which makes the deck amazing. You have the beatdown side and the combo side. The plant stuff and the beatdown side are the Tengus, the Tour Guides, and Thunder Kings. And I guess the main power from the deck comes from its versatility, but also just the fact that you can't really side against this because if you set in hand traps, you get beaten down, and vice versa. So, yeah, this deck's very good, obviously.
Yeah, we talked about not being able to side against this deck before the recording. So, yeah, the thing is, the best card against this deck is probably Maxi, because you get punished for your one-for-one plays, for example, or Debris. Most of the time, our plants can side that out and go for a kind of a more beatdown-based strategy with the Cyber Dragons and Thunder Kings. You have a lot of options in your side deck. You can side into anti-meta with a bunch of Dynas or even Dimensional Fissure or more stun elements. So yeah, we think this is the deck to beat. Uh, it wasn't very popular in the Format Library tournament, which was without Darkwood, so you can see in the side deck Imps, for example. So yeah, I'm not sure why. Maybe because it's the deck is kind of soft because Billy Breck's list so effectively. Uh, yeah, you can't change much about the deck. So yeah, think this is going to be the best deck in the tournament, and we just go to the next deck, which was very popular in the last Farmers Library Tournament tournament, which is Chaos Agents. Uh, Necro don't like the deck for personal
Yeah,
reasons. Yeah, what
I
can we
can
say?
tell you why. Yeah, I can tell you why, definitely. This deck wrecks, the fair decks. If you are playing X-Sabers, you're getting Ruffle Stomped by this. Just you have like Master Hyperion, it's just Dark Arm Dragon, but you have three, and it's easier to summon. I mean, it's more reliable to summon this, and it's just such a crazy deck. You have amazing first turn plays. Torguide is amazing, obviously. I mean, the deck just flows very well in terms of matching across the early game into the mid game into the late game, and it has constant pressure. And I'm playing zombie mid range for the most part, and I'm just scared of this deck because just one Hyperion can just mess your whole setup up, and it's very hard to come back from like a big agent push.
Yeah, this is besides Darkwood, this is probably also the most explosive deck in this format. I mean, you have your Venus and Burton plays. Um, as I said, a bunch of boss monsters. Christia's very powerful as well. I mean, if we played a couple of matches last, I think 2 weeks ago was it, or 1 week ago, and every
Yeah.
time the agent matchups were like, okay, I drop Christia, okay, it's over, or you reborn Christia. So Christia, very powerful card. Black Luster Soldier, of course, as well, and yeah, you got this chaos element. So yeah, the biggest problem of this deck is that you can just draw a bunch of bricks like your shine balls, or sometimes if you don't draw Earth or Venus for your starting plan or tour guide, the deck doesn't have that much going for it. Yeah, still a very powerful deck. If you it won the last Format Library tournament, the last Tengu Plant Format Library tournament. Um, so yeah, if you get a good day with the deck, it's still can sack your way through.
There are two more things to say about this deck.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why it's so powerful against like the mid-range stuff is, most of the time invest 2 cards in like big Synchro Monster or something like that, and the Master Hyperion comes around and just pops it for free, basically, and then the agent player is going to push for damage. So, and then there's this big Hyperion just sitting there. You have to answer that, and it's not easy. So even if you answer the Hyperion, chances are your opponent has just another Chaos Monster and Hyperion, and that usually is enough to win the game. Big downside of this deck is that card on the left side of your screen that's Leeching Light. That gets hated out quite a bit. So any deck that can support Tour Guides is going to be very good. Leeching Light against agents.
Yeah, hovering over
because you can just
this,
randomly kill them.
Yeah.
So.
Hovering over this wasn't on purpose, by the way. So, and it's kind of great to have this card right now on my screen, so you can see. Yeah, Leeching the Light is basically the biggest counter for this deck. And yeah, it's probably still the most best deck to play boss monsters, like even more than normal chaos builds. Which I find very interesting is because when I played the Darkwood matchup, I got completely stomped most of the time back when I started playing in 2017. So I think having Darkwood in the format is kind of bad for this deck. So let's get to the next deck. And we know how some people feel about the inclusion of Darkwood in this format. I think it makes the format more interesting in terms of side deck building, and the conversation I had with a friend of mine last night was that the more people play Darkwood, the more problems the deck gets, because if you just start with a Darkwood dealings and you don't know you play a mirror match, you are going to get hard punished for that. So I think it's frustrating to play against deck. I mean, you can see Trap Does Shoot, all those hand control stuff like Drag Down, and if you start with your turbo cards, it's frustrating to play against this deck because it feels solitaire-like. I think it adds a lot to the format. So yeah, I think most of the time people exclude this deck from the format is just because they don't like it. So I don't know how you feel about the inclusion of Dark World. It's one of the top decks for sure, and the strength of the deck really depends how much people are going to side for it. If we look at YCS Columbus, for example, which was the first big tournament where this deck was legal, people came prepared for the deck. They had debunks in the side deck, Shadow Imprisonings, and Gemini Imps, so there was a lot of Dark World hate. So that was probably the main reason why this deck underperformed. Jolando had the same topic in one of his videos. I think it was in the Plant video, where it said that Darkwood underperformed because people had a lot of side deck hate against it.
Yeah, so I would personally, just my personal opinion, but I would not bring this deck to a tournament because there are too many unknown factors that are relevant to your success with the deck. Pretty much, if this deck goes first, then it's quite powerful. The chances you're going to win are just get so much better if you go first, for obvious reasons, because you'll just pick apart their hand. You can even discard like Deep Prisons, Caiuses, a Heavy Storm, any card that kind of stops you, and then you can just Grapha is enough to win the game. If your opponent has nothing left of relevance, anyways. Big underlooked issue with this deck is that just normal direct attacks from whatever are also good against this deck. I personally keep in Darkhold against this deck because you clear the field and you can directly, pretty much safely. So the deck definitely has issues, and this deck gets way better when people are not expecting it, which may sound obvious, but with this deck in particular, it's very true. So I like the possible metagame shifts and you know that this deck provides. So I like to include this deck.
I would compare this deck a bit to the Lightstone situation you have in Edison. Um, Lightsworn was pretty much ignored for in the last in the tournaments last year, and then I think it was the pumpkin. I think it was the first or the second big Edison tournament where Lightsworn just won the whole thing because no one expected it, and so people didn't cite Light Imprisoning Mirror or Starlight Roads for this specific matchup. So Lightsworn had the chance to win the whole thing. There was a bit of luck involved, obviously, but this deck, Dark Void, can also brick a bit different than Lightsworn. Yeah, the next couple of tournaments, Lightsworn had a couple more problems because people then brought Light Imprisoning Mirrors. So I think that's the same case for this deck. So what I predict is that I know there is one Darkwood player in our server who could bring the deck to a tournament. I think the deck is going to win at least one tournament in the future, or even top it, because no one is going to expect it, so no one will side for it that much. And then the next tournament, the deck's going to have a bad time again because people will go full Columbus on the deck again, and it's going to get absolutely destroyed games 2 and 3. So yeah, kind of a similar situation to Lightsworn. Yeah, still a very explosive deck, a lot of turbo cards. Um, and yeah, you can still draw too much spells or too much traps. So this deck, like Agents, can basically lose to itself. That's why Plant's still better than those two decks, even if both have a bit of a higher ceiling. Um, but I mean, you can still argue that Plants still have a similar ceiling with all the plant stuff.
But Plants
So
has more lines of attack, which makes it
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. Darkwood is kinda a solitaire deck, so yeah, you just draw through your deck and you want to add on Grapha, a bunch of virus cards, or your Mind Crushes should be alive. So yeah. Then a deck that was very popular in the past as well, which is Chaos. So this deck, similar to Agents, drops wants to win through boss monsters. It's a bit different. It's not that explosive like Agents. Has a little bit less boss monsters. And it's a bit more grindy with all those floaters like Dimensional Alchemist, which I think is such a cool card. I really like this card, so I was so happy that I could finally play a deck with this. So I'm also a big fan of the Edison Agent Fairy deck for the same reason. I really like Dimensional Alchemist, such a cool card. Um, so yeah, this deck also feels kind of like a toolbox deck. So you run a bunch of like good single cards like Thunder King and bunch of searchable one-offs. Sangan Reaper, you got your hand traps, Cyber Dragons, Chaos. So this deck has a similar world to the Agent deck, but it's way more consistent. You have way less ways to get your brick hands, just for the fact that you're not going to play 500 attack vanilla monsters. Um, and yeah, it's also a great deck against all those mid-range decks. So I had great results against those mid-range decks like zombies, like X-Saber. Um, I think this deck is works really well against plants as well, but has its problems against those more explosive decks, which are going to put out a lot of pressure, like Darkwoods and Agents. So um, I'm I don't know how this deck will perform, but I'm sure it will top the event if anyone is going to pilot it. So what do you think about like the pure Chaos build?
Uh, I actually don't have much to say about this deck. It just feels a little bit more solid than Agents. but definitely does not have the high top end that agents have. It also does not have the very powerful early game of Sengachi, but you have Thunder King, you have Space for Gale, which is also very amazing in this format. And yeah, it depends on what you want. If you want a little bit more solid of a kind of a toolboxy deck that can incorporate Thunder King, I go with Chaos. So
I think this deck has such a strong late game. I mean, if you play like a more grindy deck, so I think you basically can't play a grindy deck against this deck because the longer those games go, the less of a chance you have of winning. So if you can't put enough pressure on this deck, you're going to have a bad time. So yeah, a lot of people will play this deck in the tournament. Um, or I think a lot of people will play this deck in the tournament. So yeah, let's get to the next deck, which was also very popular in on format library, I think, which was TG Stun, which is obviously the best stun deck in this format. Um, so yeah, I'm not a big fan of this deck, uh, not because not of the playability, but it's not that exciting to play. What do you think, Necro, about TG Stun?
it's annoying to play against. It's so good. It's so good. You have the whole beast army, one of the Phantom Beast, which is just crazy. You can tear apart Thunder Kings. You can just draw cards, draw more disruption, so that your opponent just can't come back. But obviously, this deck does not have the high top end of like plants or agents. You're just sitting there with like one beat stick at a time. It's very solid deck. Uh, Sometimes you have conflicting hands with like the wrong trap cards. That's the flaw of trap cards. You can have just the wrong one in the wrong situation, and this deck's amazing. Like if you like just to put one guy on the field to shut your opponent out of the game, set a bunch of back row, then this deck's good. This deck has a lot of really powerful tools.
Yeah, what I personally like about this deck is that it's just not a straight anti-meta deck. It's not like some Fossil Diner um, sets a bunch of cards or activate stuff like Necro Rallies. So it has its Floodgate with Skill Drain, which is very powerful, but this deck can also play on its own. It has synchro options with the TG Striker, which is very nice. It can grind with Autos Floaters, the Tengus, the TG's cards. So it's way more versatile than a more traditional anti-meta deck, which just has this one line of play and this one game plan, which is just to stun your opponent and not let him play Yu-Gi-Oh. Um, so that's what I like about the format, that you have just a very interactive anti-meta deck, in my opinion, which has a lot of everything, I think. So yeah, those are the five top decks. Um, but the great thing about this format is that you also have a lot of solid rogue options, which I think could perform well as well. So yeah, the first deck I want to talk about in the rogue category is Scraps. So yeah, this is a deck that performed really well in the format library tournament. I think it got third place, which was by Blub, I think. And I talked with him a lot about this deck, and uh, yeah, do you like Scraps, Necro?
Like it a lot. It has some stun elements. It can just beat down, but it can also go over the top with Scrap Dragon. So you can just control the game with Scrap Dragon. You can put Stardust on the board, but you also have Sanaki. You have Tengu and Scrap Beast together with Horn of the Phantom Beast, which is just it's amazing. Your opponent has to fear the Horn of the Phantom Beast all the time. They also have to fear the Scrap Dragon, and it's cool. I like it.
Yeah, what I like about this deck a lot is that it does one specific thing very, very good, or the best in this format, which is spamming level 8 synchros. Like Scrap Dragon, I think Scrap Dragon is the best level 8 synchro of this format. And Scrap Dragon is already a very strong card. But if you consider that you can summon a Scrap Dragon which also floats into a monster, that's absolutely insane. So you can also go into full consistency and still play just a solid control deck. Especially those interactions like a Ribbon Tango and Horn of the Phantom Beast. Um, you can fit your hand traps very easily in this deck. So yeah, and also what you also have to consider is that this deck can side deck all those floodgates very effectively, like Shadow Imprisoning Mirrors or Light Imprisoning Mirrors or even Gozen Match if you want to side Gozen Match. Uh, so I'm not sure how this deck will perform. Really depends if someone pilots it that plays it very well because this deck has a lot of problems against the chaos or the chaos matchups. Um, Especially the normal chaos deck, but also against agents. So that's why you have like 5 negation cards in this deck. Uh, and also Shadow Imprisoning Mirrors for the sorcerers in the chaos matchup. So yeah, what do you think, Necro? Will this deck perform well in the tournament?
It definitely has a chance. The question I'd like to ask is how many people are going to play this? Is just one person or zero even? Because scraps are not really on people's radar,
I think
to be
it got
honest.
more on people's radar after the Format Library tournament because there were, I think, a bunch of people that played it. It was more played than Sabers, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So I don't know if people still remember that this deck performed really well. So yeah, let's see um, how this deck will perform in the end. And let's get to another rock option. Uh, that's actually is it the right? Yeah, I think it's is the
Yeah, it looks right. Yeah, it looks right.
no, that's it. Okay, that's yeah. It was another list. That's the
Oh,
current list.
yeah, sure.
The other one was the pack list. That's the current list we use. So yeah, heroes. Not that explosive compared to the March 2012 hero list because you don't have access to Blade Armor Ninja, which was like the main OTK enabler for this deck. So um, this deck takes more of a stun approach, but still a very solid rogue option. Very popular deck also in other like retro formats like March 2012, but also I saw it in the last Edison tournament as well. Or it's just a great, just still a great control deck. Also, the access to Shining, which you have in September 2011, is a huge boost for this deck. Um, so yeah, the question is how this deck will perform in the tournament and how people are going to play it. But because there were a bunch of different approaches to this tournament, to this deck. Like you could also I saw builds with tour guides and like Black Luster Soldier, which you could play, or more of a stun version. Or s I think some people will also play the Puck version because Puck. This was the first September 2011 deck. Puck profiled on his channel.
Yeah,
So
and a lot of people saw it. So one thing about this deck, or just about this video and format of the decks in general, if you ask the question, how successful will the deck be? Well, it depends. If people know the interactions. If you don't know that heroes run Gemini Spark, and you just run into it, then it's obviously going to be pretty bad for you. And even worse if you're playing against Scrap and you summon your Thunder King and you run it into the Tengu, and they flip horn. That's pretty much it's not game over, but
yeah,
you know,
true. That's one of the main points we forgot about scraps that you
yeah,
just have those interactions. People are not going to expect that much. Like Heroes, for example, which is just a popular deck. or one of the most iconic decks even in this game's history, in my opinion.
But it depends on, how aware are you of those, little tricks, stuff like Icarus attack and so on and so forth. You have to know how to play around certain things depending on the matchup. And yeah.
Yeah, so I still think it's a very solid deck, which could perform very well. Um, maybe has more problems when it goes second, but I think you can still manage that as well. Um, especially if you play like a Cyber Dragon build, or even, I mean, you still have those options with Gemini Spark as well, and you have the option to side floodgates like macro, like Skill Drain, which is also very devastating in a lot of matchups. So like a lot of things this deck can do. I think it's only going to be playable as a control deck. Maybe people are going to try Diva Hero because that's a very popular Edison deck. That's a question we're going to ask us about another deck in a couple of seconds. So yeah, this is the your favorite deck, which you played for years like to death, and it won the last Edison tournament, which was a Diva, which was a Diva Hero, not the Diva Hero deck, a Diva Zombie deck. So, do you think people are going to have this deck for that reason? People are going to have this deck on the radar for this tournament as well.
First of all, I'd like to point out that don't look at the side deck. It's pretty bad. It's outdated. But this deck is, I don't think this deck is going to be successful because it takes a lot of experience to appropriately play this in this format because it just looks weak and it is weak. But that does not mean that it's bad. It just means that definitely have to know how to play each card. And you have stuff like Tragodia, Caius, and all those cards are very cool. But it's not going to be enough if you don't know how to use cards. I mean, that sounds very obvious. That sounds like, that applies to every deck. But this deck is so fragile that you definitely have to, if your opponent makes an attack, you definitely have to stare at your hand, at your Tragodia, and you have to think about, do I waste, do I use the track here? Do I prison here? Do I Caius here? And it's just I don't think this deck's powerful enough that you can allow like a small mistake with this deck, because if you're playing against agents, there's no room at all. So pretty much, if you want to play this deck, go ahead. It's very good. It's actually in my opinion, the best mid-range deck in this format. But I'd definitely playtest. Definitely playtest the deck if you're going to.
So you
But
have to.
it definitely has a lot of tricks. It can catch your opponent off guard. If they don't have a monster, they fear Spirit Reaper. If they attack into you with a Sender King, they fear Track, or the Caius and all that stuff. And it's also very, very efficient. So all your stuff floats. You poke very well with Goblin Zombie, and yeah, I mean the deck tries to make the game very, I guess, unpredictable for your opponent. So
So maybe the higher power level can be a bigger problem for this deck.
yes, stuff like Chaos and stuff like Agents, where they just put a big guy on board and just go plus for free. I mean, that's obviously a problem for this deck because this deck relies on card advantage, and it also relies on poking. You want to attack directly with Goblin Zombie. That's actually, yes, it's a win condition for this deck. And if your opponent is way too efficient with those big cards and they put too much pressure on you, then obviously you're going to have a bad time. But this deck's amazing against like Karakuri, where you just side in like in Veiler, and you set the double prisons, make roach, and you win. Deck is also good against like anything fair, like X-Sabers. It's very powerful against heroes, against you know,
So more of those
whatever you
grind,
have.
more of those grindy matchups. So the deck has more problems
Yeah,
against those deck with those more explosive decks or decks that you have to pressure. Um, you performed really well against plants, I think, but you had more problems against agents, especially when we play tested. So
yes.
yeah, very interesting deck. Maybe someone picks it up that really likes it or plays it a lot. Let's see. No, the next deck, which is which was way better in back in 2010. I mean, we both know that. Um, that it's the last format where you can trigger multiple Dark Souls, so it's still broken, right?
It very much is. It's very close to zombies, in my opinion. It does not have the flexibility. It does not have the good grind as zombies. I mean, just look at Pashul and Air Balloon. Spirit Reaper is just way better. But the deck obviously has a way higher top end. You know, you have Golem's Equal, you have Fault Roll, and you can kill your opponent nowhere. The deck also has a very very strong extra deck. You have options. You have Natural Beast. You have Bakyon. You have Hanley, and all those cards are great. So what I like about this deck, just kind of similar to Plants, is that it has a lot of lines of attack. You can disrupt their hand with Gotems. You can set up Natural Beast with disruption. You can set up Natural Bakyon with disruption. And yeah, this deck can also grind. You know, it runs in this deck. You see double enemy controller, so Full Knight's good. And yeah, the deck's cool. If you like a grindy deck that can also combo, that can also has different game plans, I guess this deck's very fun. And this deck is powerful as well,
Yeah.
obviously.
What you also have to consider is, especially if you have those rogue decks still have to do specific things better than other decks. Like if you take um, yeah, if you take scraps for example, like I told before, spamming level 8 synchros, summoning those floating scrap dragons, that's something specific that the deck has going for it. Zombies with the consistency and with with the whole mid-range plan, which this deck does so effectively in the
Yeah,
grinding. Um, and yeah, heroes, same thing for heroes. And yeah, X-Saber still with the extra has just a broken extra deck, in my opinion. Like Hanley's killing 3 cards, Naturia Beast, Bakyon. If the deck can go off, it puts just a lot of pressure on on the board. It has a lot of OTK potential. So I think the last September tournament, I think it was from Decades of Duels. This deck, I think, won or got in the finals. So maybe someone is going to pick it up. We thought it was we thought people would play it way more in the last format library tournament because people hyped the multiple Dark Souls searches. But those are not that relevant a lot of times, right?
yeah, it's not that relevant, but it's Dark Souls is definitely good. Obviously, um, one of the big strengths of this deck is if you make a push, then Dark Soul facilitates your next push. So you make a push, you're automatically setting up your next one. So the deck the deck is obviously very good. You can play this and you can win. So I mean, don't be afraid.
Has potential, can side Gozen match as well. So
Yes.
yeah, let's see how this deck performs. We also got another deck that people also sometimes consider a meta deck, or one of the top decks is Karakuri. The deck still has some issues, and we got also what I think is that we got the um, spot for a combo deck already covered with like Darkwood and Agents for the top decks, or even Plants. What this deck does better than Plants is that it just can go off with all those combos. I mean, this build that we see right now is a high ceiling build with like where you just go where you hard lose against Maxi, but go for those big combos with multiple Boredos. Um, Jeff Jones played the stack in the format uh,
Yeah, way
on
back
the
when we played it.
way back then in Toronto and in Columbus, and I think he topped both events with it. I think it was one top eight in the top eight in Toronto and top 16 in Columbus. So the deck has a lot of potential. Also those big Naturia synchros, um, which
Yeah,
you also have to consider. So yeah, you think this is going to have a top spot?
probably not. Probably not. The deck has too many flaws, I guess. It's easily sided against, uh, and I mean, it just loses to back row, I guess, too much for my taste. One thing that's pretty cool, it makes the deck way better. The card that is underlooked is Naturia Landois, because it does not matter how many cards you draw, the Landois is just going to kill you. So, yeah, I mean, possibly, but I'm not sure. I don't like the chances of this deck to.
I think what the positive, what the best thing this deck had going for it, and Jeff back in the day had going for it, was that Maxi wasn't that popular, especially in Toronto. Um, I mean, if you look at all the old lists in Toronto, people just play one or maybe two Maxis. I think Billy Bragg was one of the only people that just maxed out on three copies in the main deck. So yeah, now in a more modern setting, where everyone knows that Maxi is probably the best, or where Maxi is the best hand trap of this format, um, this deck is going to have a lot of issues. And another thing which we're going to see on a different combo deck in this format is if you go for your combo, you can't just stop. Otherwise, you end on such a weak board. I mean, sure, if you have your one of your tuners and an instant fusion, you can just summon the Stardust. Uh, but if that's fine as a board, but otherwise you just end on a weak board. Or uh, if you go second, you obviously want to OTK with this deck. So yeah, Maxi hurts it a lot. Effect Vela as well. Um, but people, I still think someone is going to play it in the tournament. I mean, um, it's also very iconic. It's saw play in other formats as well, especially with the Gears. So people know this deck exists. So let's see what people are going to do with it. So the last deck we're going to take a look at is also a deck people like or hate. There's no in between, uh, and I get I get it from both sides. I mean, um, the side that hates this deck is hates it because it's so frustrating to play against it when it just goes off. But it's such a fun deck to play. Very complex. So this deck also has the same issue that Zombies has, that you just can't pick this deck just up um, like the 2014 hat deck and just play with it. You have to playtest this deck a lot because it has also a lot of issues in this format. But the thing this deck does better is, I mean, means it needs way more setup than Karakuri, for example. Uh, but it has can just stop when it gets maxied and go for a more resilient board. Um, like like when you have Necromancer and Archfiend, you can search for a barrier, and ending on Archfiend Necromancer with a negate is also something that is very decent, especially uh, a slower type of format like September 2011. And what you also have as an option is that it's something that a Slash or Hydro Pump um, started doing, which I really liked. It's a sideboard thing that Hoben did back in the day in another format. So what the sideboard does is that it completely kills Maxi. You just side out all your combo stuff and you just go for a heavy grind game, which is also possible with this deck. So I'm not sure if Hydropump is going to play this in the tournament. It's possible. I mean, he has a lot of experience with this deck, so he's one of those people that can pick it up very easily. Uh, it's also very popular in the community. And yeah, it's kind of infamous. I mean, a lot of people know what this deck did with relaunchers. Uh, or in the head format with triple lava chain and soul charged. I mean, that's probably the best version of Infernity. So yeah, what do you think this deck is going to do in the tournament? Um, you
So I think this deck can win a tournament. It's very powerful. It can play through hate. That's also very important. And I guess a lot of people misplay against this deck. I misplay against this deck also. So you can definitely outsmart your opponent with this. Uh, so and that's also one of the reasons why you have to play this. The combo lines are complex, uh, and you can also just ignore hate. You can just ignore hate. You can search Infinity Break or a barrier, and just attack them with Archfiend, no problem. You can let a Necromancer sit there, use the effect next turn, no problem. So the deck requires practice, and it's powerful. It can grind. It can ignore hate, all that stuff. Uh, I think it's good.
yeah. Landing all those combos is very fun. What this I think this deck can also use Levier very effectively, especially with those combos. Some people play double Levier, but I think one is enough because you're just going to summon him for the combo with Bryanek and and while when you loop Infinity Mirage. So yeah, the deck has a lot of potential. It can go for the sideboard plan as well, but also do different stuff. Uh, so yeah, I'm not sure how this deck will perform. What you also have to consider, Necro, is that the deck hard loses to Thunder King, which is probably going to be the most played card in the tournament, besides Tango and Tour Guide. Uh, so it really depends how you draw. It can some. I mean, I built this deck in real life, so I know how bad your hands can be. It has a lot of options to just lose against itself. Um, but yeah, if you have a good day with this deck, you can just run through the entire tournament, no problem. So yeah, you wanna add anything or
No,
okay?
no, I don't have anything more.
Yeah. I mean, you can see when we scroll through all the lists, you have so many options that I'm not going to cover. You have like decks like Fabled, which still are, which can do all those synchro spam stuff. It's still a deck that Heartless Maxi or even decks like Frog Monarch or Gravekeeper or Gladiator Beast. So you have a lot of options, Machina gadgets.
And those
So
are actually complete, unlike in Edison format, but that's just
yeah,
my little tidbit.
yeah, that's a different topic. Yeah, decks feel a bit more complete sometimes. So yeah, Worm's also a deck which you can play. So you have so many options for this tournament. You can also play the odd deck that you played back in the day. If you like suffering, you can play Light Swan or Blackwing with one Kalut and one Black Whirlwind. So yeah, a lot of options and with a lot of decks that are decent in the raw category. So yeah, um, now we take a look at all the uh, single cards which I think are going to be relevant. I mean, um, we have all those cards that I think we'll see play in almost every deck, which are Ribbon Tengu, uh, Tour Guide and Thunder King. those three main monsters. Thunder King, um, such a strong card in this format. Denying searches is so powerful, and also being able to negate a big summon. One nine beater. This card has almost everything. It's a light monster for Blackluster Soldier, which got limited in this format back in the day. So, yeah, do you think Thunder King is the best card of this format?
Probably is the best card of this format, but it also depends on the meta game. If a lot of people are playing like, I don't know, Karakuri, or even heck Dragonity, or some kind of weird synchro deck, then Thunder King is definitely the best. Thunder King is also good against like agents. If you have a Thunder King, they can't just Hyperion and kill you. So Thunder King is nice insurance against that. Um, I guess I like Tour Guide a little bit more because Tour Guide does not depend as much on how the metagame is actually shaped, and Tour Guide makes decks actually more consistent because you can just get Sengen, and yeah, I think Tour Guide's, in my opinion, just a tad bit stronger than King, and I guess you will see more Tour Guides than Thunder King probably.
Yeah, even though Turgot fits in less decks. I mean, people tried playing her in Heroes as well, which I disagree with. Um, at the end, those TG stand decks, you're not going to see Tour Guide. Especially if you wanna go into an instant level rank 3 exceed, or just want to have a Dark Engrave, special summon out your Sangan. Yeah, I don't. I think it's kind of obvious. Tour Guide is very powerful. Reborn Tango. I mean, the format gets the name from this card. It's not only a great card in synchro strategies, not only in plans or um, decks like Fables or Quick Draw, very powerful. It's also great in those beast type control decks like TG Stun and also Scraps, where it's insane if you can go for a synchro play, especially with the Scrap Dragon, but also with a card like Horn of the Phantom Beast. So yeah, Tango also very versatile. I think you're going to see those cards a lot. Then we have yeah, the big elephant in the room, the big 3K. I'm going to OTK you elephant in the room. Um,
I'm going to top deck you out of the game
yeah,
card.
yeah,
You
I'm
know,
going. Yeah, I think top decking BLS. I think this is probably one of the main reasons why people um, decide to against playing this format. And I can't blame them for most part. So yeah, what can
I just I'm on the fence about this. It's just very, if you ask me, it's quite you will get a quite subjective answer. This card has a border artwork. It's just legendary. It's fucking Blackluster Soldier and War of the Beginning. Hello. I like to have this card in the game, but at the same time, the card is just way too powerful. And it's if I had to pick one card to ban, it would be this card. So yeah, I like it. I like to play with it, but I'm also taking taking a lot of shit playing against this card. So
mm,
it's whatever.
uh,
It's cool.
yeah, I think Sorcerer would be enough. I mean, Sorcerer still
Sorcerer is enough.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's a situation we all are very familiar with. If when your opponent benches light and the dark, you always hope it's just the Chaos Sorcerer. In exclamation marks, it's just the Chaos Sorcerer, because this card can just fuck you over way in so many more ways. Um, so especially if you have like those BLS Armory Arm OTKs or BLS Honest OTKs. That's something Sorcerer, for example, can't do. Um, and funny thing, I talked with Doba last night about this as well. This card was responsible for people back in Gold format forgetting Chaos Sorcerer, because this card was so much more powerful than Chaos Sorcerer. I mean, people now know that Sorcerer is also a great card, and you can just play 4 Chaos monsters, for example. You can do that in September 2011 as well. So yeah, very iconic card. I mean, I think one of the best looking cards, especially in real life. I love this card in IOC first edition. So yeah, I like how like playing these cards in my decks as well. It's sometimes very frustrating when you have the game in the back and you just get killed from out of nowhere from a BLS. That's sometimes unnecessary, or where you get in a position where you want to grind and your opponent drops BLS and you can and all your stuff gets banished each turn. It's
But
not that
I don't
fun.
think that this card is just bad for the game. Uh, you know, if you're playing the plant mirror, you have to keep this card in mind. You know, you
Yeah, that's true.
possibly have to save your Thunder King in the late game. Just on the turn, you know, the turn before you close the game out, you summon Thunder King, you say no to a potential BLS, and usually the person who drops BLS first is at a, you know, gives up a small edge. You know, it's just your trump card. They can, you know, just if you play it, banish Scrap Dragon. That's a big. But if you just summon BLS to attack randomly, I don't think that's very good. So it's kind of
Yeah,
similar to
unless you
Go
can
Control.
unless you can close out the game, of course. If you can
Yeah,
close out the game, then you can go for the double attack.
yeah, usually it's just better to hold this card for the right moment. So it's not all that horrible, but yeah,
Yeah,
let's
it
be
takes
real, the
skill.
deck would be better without it. Yeah,
It takes skill in some regard. Yeah, especially if your opponent has to look out for it. Yeah, consider if you're going to use like a warning on one of the synchros, or you just want to keep it for Blackluster Soldier. So yeah, but yeah, I think it's a card that I think the format overall would be better would be better without it. But you, there's no format without any problematic cards. So yeah, I think I would take this over Royal Oppression, for example, or, every day. Every day.
for sure.
Okay, but that's also highly subjective. Some people probably love Oppression more. So yeah, not not to take just to add
If you're
that.
playing TGs, yes.
Yeah, you're going to like Oppression more. You can run Vanity's Emptiness, which is also a card that could see play in stun based deck. And I saw someone in the server main decking triple emptiness in plants. So maybe this card is going to uh, see some play in this tournament. We will see. So next we have the hand traps. I mean, we could also add Gauss to it. I mean, I think Maxi and Vela are going to see a bit more play. Um, Especially if you play a back row heavy deck, then I think Gauss gets played less. I mean, it's still in a lot of the top decks. Yeah, Maxi is a card that Joshua Schmidt actually did a video. I think it was yesterday or the day before, where he talked about this card in a modern, how it would affect modern play, or if we need it back in modern play. Great video. You can check it out. I will link it in the description. Um, so,
Actually, this format,
what do you think about Maxi in this format? How it affects all the top
yeah,
decks? How it shaped the format? Because this when this card was released back in the day, I know a friend of mine bought them for after the Storm of Ragnarok release for like €5 a piece. So um, this card already got expensive in this format, even more in 2012. And I mean, we all know, thanks to Billy Bragg right now, uh, that this card is like the best hand trap in this format.
so I think this is very good design. Actually, I like it. It's one of my favorite cards actually. And it's funny that you mentioned Josh's video because uh, this format it goes hand in hand with the explanation that Josh did in my, because September 11 has a deck like Fabled, which is insanely powerful. But sadly, with Maxi in the game, you can't just go all in all the time. you lose a substantial amount of games with Fables against Maxi.
Yeah. I think he
So
actually
that's not going to happen.
mentioned Fabled as well, like
Yeah,
as an example for those weaker combo decks that Maxi kept in check back in the day.
yeah, because I think Fable's amazing in this format, but Maxi just wrecks it. So Maxi, there are quite a bit of downside. So what I like about this card is that it's very powerful, but you have to think, you know, what's the field going to look like? What does my deck value? Does my deck already run 12 traps, 13 traps? Uh, do I need the Maxi? So it's not just a free off in every deck. You can even argue that you run zero, you run two, because you are going to run into TGs, you're going to run into heroes, into stun, into all that kind of stuff. And Maxi is going to be the worst card against those decks. So you really have to assess the meta game and yeah, the deck, the Maxi, it has clear downsides to it, but it's also amazing against certain decks. It's amazing against Fables, and it's very good against plants also. But again, not all the time, because plants just can summon Thunder King and beat you down. So yeah,
I think Maxi actually gets worse when the format gets more random, which I saw in a lot of those modern modern tournaments for other formats, where people like to play more slow, grindy decks. TG Stun was very popular. Chaos got way more popular um, in the format library, for example. And Maxi's not that great against those decks. So yeah, it really depends. And I still think it's still an insane hand trap. Uh, After game, and it's also very interesting against plants because thanks to Maxi, um, a lot of plant players are going to side out those more greedy cards like One for One and Debris Dragon and go for a more beatdown strategy. Uh, so yeah, it really impacts the format in a very interesting way. And yeah, I think Josh, if Josh can explain this way better than we both could, so yeah, look up the video if you want to know more about this card. I mean, it's also at Free Master. It's at Free Master Duels. That this format is also thanks to the band list way different compared to the normal TCG. So the second hand trap we have is Effect Veiler, which I think is better in the format after September 2011, which is March. And I think also that Veiler also is better in formats where you have more explosive decks, which was the case with like Wind Ups and Exactors. But still by a long shot the second most important hand trap. Uh, and also, yeah, main targets obviously tour guide from the underworld. Um, in a lot of cases, or like negating a debris dragon, like a big discard just is a -1, so it has to stop a big play. Uh, in my opinion. So yeah, what do you think about Vela? Card has also its issues in the format. It's also very important, especially thanks to the light attribute.
it's kind of on the same. It has similar problems like Maxi, because if you're playing against TGs or even Dark Worlds, you know, you just have to get the wrong matchup and just draw this card and look at it, and that's pretty much the end of the story. But Veda, there's not much to say about this card. It's good that it's light. It's also helpful that it's a tuner, because you can use it with like a Ghost token or something. But it's pretty standard card. You just discard it, negate something. Uh, it's just Veda. The one big thing about this card is that it's not going to stop like a wombo combo like today. It's going literally. It's stopping like it's going to be a 1-for-1 trade. Like you're going to stop like a Kaios, If you're lucky, you're going to stop like a Trishula. Uh, yeah, it can be good against like some silly combo deck like Karakuri. It's amazing and fabled if you have Maxi to have it. But other than that, don't have much to say about this card. It's pretty simple card.
Yeah. Um, we will see. I think this card gets better when it's when more explosive decks are on the run. Also, what you have as an interesting card in Agents, which is basically an Infect Radar on steroids, is Herald of Orange Light. Uh, Also very powerful card. It's not in this list because it's more of a it's a more specific card that you can't run in every deck. So yeah, then we just go over staples you have in this format, MST, which is going to be played in more explosive decks at 3 and in more of the stun-based strategies at 0 or at 1. I would run one MST in most decks, and if you have access to Lila in your deck, you can also run only one copy of MST. Card 1 to 3 with the banned list, and Heavy Storm, which is also in most decks, unless you just play like a TG deck with that sets like 4 or Infernity. But then you can still side this card in when you go second. Dark Hole and Monster Reborn. Then we have, as for trap cards, we have Warning Judgment, which you're going to play in almost every deck. Torrential Tribute as well. And Trap Dust Shoot. Um, I mean, we had a long discussion about this card, and I also made on my own channel a video about this card. Um, this card also is better when you play against those more fast-paced decks, uh, where you can take advantage after resolving the card, and where you also get advantage for the hand, knowing your hand. So Trap does shoot a very powerful card, creates also very frustrating game states. Um, but the thing is, you have to do something with this advantage because Dash Shoot is not a +1. You have to do something in the next couple of turns because otherwise, your information about your opponent's hand or back row is going to fade away sooner or later. So you can't just run this card in like a TG deck or a very slow. I really dislike this card also in the normal in the Chaos deck, uh, where you go for a really slow grind game. I think this card is so wasted in this deck, especially when people run it as a single copy trap. Um, because what's also great about Dust Shoot is that you can see if what when you play cards like Warning or even Bottomless Trap Roll, you know what your opponent has in his hand. I mean, we talked about this in the BLS case that if if your opponent doesn't have BLS in his hand because you shuffled it back, or you have the information, you can just use your removal cards on something different. So I think that's the big strength of this card. So I think it would still consider it as a staple. You think that as well?
I don't think this card is a staple at all. Uh, it very much depends on the kind of deck you're running. If your deck is fast and your deck puts pressure, then yes, this card is good. But if your
No, I
deck
mean,
does not put any substantial amount of pressure, uh, or I guess Clock would be a better
yeah,
term because a deck like GB does put pressure on your
okay.
opponent, but GB does not close the game out fast. So
I think it's not going to be a staple because it should be a staple card, but it's going to be a staple because I still think a lot of people are going to run this card.
yes, a lot of
Because,
people are going to run this card because I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm on a high horse or something, but a lot of people just don't understand the card correctly.
yeah.
This card is not going to be good in like mid-range zombies where I just set Goblin Zombie and pass for 5 turns. So this card is going to be good though if you're running like a deck like I don't know, Karakuri or
I think
Agents possibly.
even in decks like Scraps, because you can, I mean, it's a slower, grindier deck, but you still have the option to resolve this card and then go for a bigger kind of play like Scrap Dragon or Tengu. So I think this card is very good in decks which are able to push or
Yes.
do a big push. So yeah, but we're not going to repeat the whole dust shoot discussion. I mean, we had this. It's the dead horse basically. Um, Now we go to the side deck cards. I think that's the card. I think is going to be should be this most cited card or even main deck card in some decks, which is Cyber Dragon. This card is so strong and underrated, especially even without Reinhardt Zenmains, where you have the option to just put Zenmains in the grave and just go for a Chimera attack. So yeah, you think this card is going to dominate the side decks?
Uh, Possibly. It's good against like anything, any aggro control deck like GB, Black Wings, if people choose to run that for some reason. I like Cyber Dragon actually a little bit more in decks that can combo a little bit, that special summon a little bit. Because if you're making like a synchro play and your opponent stops that, you can just Cyber Dragon and chances are they have nothing to stop that. So yeah, I think Cyber Dragon very powerful because that clears out Sunday Kings. It can randomly beat over Tengu. It randomly beats over everything TG has, besides the occasional 3K Barbaros. Um, yeah, Cyber Dragon, very good. It's kind of a beat-down format, I guess.
No.
And Cyber Dragon obviously performs in that kind of environment.
Yeah. Also can put away Catastor. Its light attribute is also very useful in my opinion, especially if you run Chaos monsters. So yeah, let I'm sure this card will perform well in the tournament. And then we have next we have the third hand trap of this format. I mean you can run Kuribo, but I think DD Crows has a lot more things it can do against certain decks. So I think this deck card gets way better when you include Darkwood in the format because banishing a Gruffer is so impactful. So this
Yes.
card is similar to Rayla. It can prevent some big plays, and when it gets discarded, it's impactful. But it's a bit more specific than Valen, for example. That's the reason why I cite only one crow in most of my side decks because you drawing multiple crows is a lot of times very bad. And I think I mentioned Edison a couple of times because in some ways those formats are similar. I think in Edison, Crow has way more decks it can hit, and that's the reason why a lot of people run 2 to 3 Crows. In Edison, for example, I think it's the most cited card there. Um, but it still has its matchup where it's really good, like Darkwoods or Infernity, or maybe Scraps. When your opponent triggers the Scrap Dragon or okay Mirror effect. Uh, so yeah, do you think this card is going to be very important in the tournament? I mean, it really depends
Uh,
which decks we're going to see, obviously.
I think this card will perform reasonably well. Uh, I think most decks should won. Uh, yeah, this card is good. It's just extra insurance against crazy stuff. I don't know. There are a lot of decks that you can randomly face. My favorite example would be like Novella's Turbo. If you're playing against that, Crow's very good. If you're playing against Dark Worlds, Crow's very good. So um, yeah, card is definitely decent. Also against Infernity.
Yeah, against
So
Infernity it can be devastating.
I like this card a lot against graveyard-oriented combo decks, like Infernity. We definitely have to stop them uh, from what they're trying to do. And interestingly enough, Crow has a lasting effect. The monster is just gone. Where with Vader, you just negated an effect and nothing really changed other than that. But Crow, the card's just gone.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think this card is going to perform really well against plants, but I have to disagree with that. Uh, I think it's decent against plants, but a lot of times people, as I said, are going to side out the debris dragons. So I think it's stronger against dark worlds. I think plants is resilient enough to manage crow banish. So yeah, just to add that to the conversation. Um, Next card I want to talk about is something I think a lot of people are not going to have on the radar. But I think this card is going to be a very effective side deck card, which is Forbidden Lands. So you started siding this card, and I just hopped on the train a bit. I think a couple of years ago.
Yes.
So I think you should talk a bit more about that.
Yes, I love this card. I think this, in my opinion, this is the best set deck card in the format. It almost does not matter what you run. If I'm like, this card protects me against like a TGEM1. It does protect against an enemy. The card also is very good if you're playing agents and you want to save your guys from bottomless trap or something like that. So Lance has a lot of applications. Lance makes Sonic King amazing. Obviously, you can save it.
That's true.
And it's a very powerful combo trick also. You know, if your opponent attacks you and they flip horn, you respond with Lance and the game is pretty much over.
Yeah,
So
it's devastating against
I think this deck,
on decks.
this card is just it's amazing. I would run like a couple in most decks.
Yep. Yeah, so this card is also very important for decks like Agents, where you just have to play through those heavy back row decks like TG or even Gladiator Beast or Infernity, for example.
I mean,
Uh,
think about it. It has so many applications. If you have, you know, I mentioned the bottomless example, but what about your opponent leeching delights you and they go attack and you go damage step, lands your guy? They just take a million damage and their guy is dead. So, uh, yeah, the card's just way too good.
yeah, that's also true. Um, yeah, I'm going to skip this for a second. That yeah, we're going to. I think we talked about Leeching the Light um, in when we looked at Agent. So this card is great, especially against BLS. Um, Main card against Agents. So uh, that's one thing that's one of the best side deck cards against Agents, but it's also only a specific card only for this matchup. So if you struggle with Agents, this card is for you. Can also and it can also be combined with Scapegoats. So some plant decks run Scapegoats in the main, or you can side Scapegoats with this. So this is just there to OTK the Agent deck, or at least clear the board. I think you should close out games with this. So let's see how many games are gonna get closed out with this card. And then the next card, where we both have different opinions about. I think it's one of the most important side deck cards of this format, especially again um, if we take Darkwood into consideration. I think this card gets way better. Um, so yeah, that's the thing about Dark World. It makes the format way more interesting and a lot of cards way better. So I think not only is this card very good against Dark World, but also against Autoscript centric decks. I mean, it can hit X-Saber, it can hit Dark World, but you also have to it can also hit plants. But I think this card is kinda underwhelming against plants again. I mean,
I
that's the
don't
strength
like
of
it good.
yeah,
No,
that's the strength of the deck being so resilient. And what you also have to consider is it can kill all those hand traps. I mean, if you want to close out a game against cows, for example, where you have to go all through all those Tragodias, hitting a Tragodia is with debunk is so powerful. Or a recruiter, amazing card for those matchups. So you have to add anything. I mean, it's a card you could see against zombies, for example, as well. Uh, uh,
so good.
it can also negate Maxi and Herald on Vela, which also which is a bit situational, but I still think it's like it's a pseudo like the September 2011 caught by, but way more specific. I mean, if you start and you get hit by Maxi, you can just activate this from your hand. I have.
It's just one of those cards where you really have to think about, what are you struggling against. That again, it's been very obvious that every deck and every person has to answer it themselves. But you know, Crow's good against Dark Worlds. Is Crow good against agents?
I,
Probably not so good.
I mean,
But Debunk's good against Dark Worlds, and
yeah,
Debunk's also good against agents, possibly. If they run Herald, hey, that's very good trade, obviously.
yeah, that's true.
So, think about that.
Yeah, so debunk a bit specifics can be sometimes dead, uh, but I still think, especially if you struggle with specific matchup, that this card should be in your side deck. The next we have cards that are way less situational, battle traps, like bottomless trapper, for example. I think bottomless trapper gets way better after priority is gone. I think that's the main issue I have with the card. And what you also have to consider is um, if you go second, which is not that much of a problem in the older formats than in modern formats, for example. Um, but if you go second and your opponent drops a Thunder King or a different big monster and you have bottomless and trap hole in your hand, that's very frustrating. So I like to side this card out a lot when I go second, and it's also great against those beatdown strategies. So if you can set it first turn against Thunder Kings, it banishes TG Rush Rhino. It's also good against Cyber Dragon as well, so you don't have to use a Thunder King. So yeah, I think in those more control-based mid-range decks, it's still a main deck card, but I would also see it as a side deck card. So what do you think about bottomless? Do you think it's also has its issues thanks to the priority, or do you think it's not that much?
I don't think that's that big of a deal. I think this card's fucking like crazy. It's important. It can definitely, it banishes the librarian, just like that. Librarian's gone,
Yeah, that's
and
important as well.
that's very important. Also, it can, if your opponent like synchro summons with a Tengu or Sangan or something, they don't have priority. So bottomless trapper gets rid of like Scrap Dragon, for
Yep.
example, and they don't get priority. Prison can just get killed by Scrap Dragon and Hyperion, but bottomless just takes care of that. I think the card's just too good, to be honest, and I would play that over Prison in most cases. Again, it depends. If you are just losing, if your opponent makes a librarian and you can't recover from card advantage like
Yeah,
that,
I think
then
it
the
really
bottomless trapper is going to be better.
it really depends on the deck. What the situation I had with Hydro Pump was when he played Infernity, he main decked bottomless originally, and we had those situations where I normal some Thunder King first turn, he drew bottomless and he couldn't remove the Thunder King, which is so important for the Infernity deck. So we decided to play Double Prison instead because it was for this specific
Yes,
situation better. Um,
yes. Just because if your deck does not have space for a lot of removal, like if you think about it, if you're playing just two bottomless as removal cards and you're playing like Infernity, obviously, if your opponent's
yeah,
going first and there's some Thunder King, it's obviously bad. So in those cases, yes, Prison is better.
yeah, that's true. Also, cards you have to consider for side decking, depending on the deck you play. Battle traps, which you main deck in some decks. I think Prison is a bit stronger in this format, thanks to those, thanks to cards like Christia, for example, or even some floaters like Sangan. But Mirror Force can be a bit more of a blowout card. So yeah, I think that's also something that really depends what matchups you're going to face. Um, I still think as cards you could consider siding in, depending which deck you're going to play. Um, Next thing, where I'm not sure if how many people are going to side this card. It really depends how scared they are of Darkwood. Are Gemini Imps. So what do you think about Gemini Imps?
Uh, Not much to say about this card. If you're losing badly to Dark Words, then cite it. If you don't, then you can ignore it. One thing that's important is decks that have already triple prison after boarding and double bottomless, and if you have Caius and stuff, you don't need it. You're just going to banish all the Graphas, and
So yeah,
that's pretty much
if
it.
you struggle maybe in Agents because the deck struggles a lot against Darkwood, otherwise. Um, so yeah, the last side deck cards I want to talk about are Floodgates. Most um, everyone loves Floodgates. They are fun and interactive. I mean, those cards are just like specific cards you could, depending on the deck, side in, like Shadow Imprisoning, Absolute Rex Darkwood. Then you get Light Imprisoning Mirror for the Agent matchup. Then if you play against Trap, a lot of Trap decks, you can side in Royal Decree. Then you have the macro cards. You could also put Necrorello into this category and Ghost Match and or Rivalry, depending um, which deck you're going to play. And also, what you could side or play in your extra deck for the Cyber Dragons are the Chimera tech. If you play against a machine-based deck like Karakuri or Gadgets, or even if you want to put away a Catasto. The last thing I want to show are the cards I think are going to be in the extra decks most of the time. So yeah, you got the only level 2 like Formula and Amaram. I mean, most of the time you're going to see those cards more in plant decks. Then Cataster and Liberian. Uh, yeah, Liberian way better than Android in almost every deck. I mean, the only case you could make for Android is that you could drop Honest. That I still think I don't think that matters that much. Then Bryanek, best level 6 synchro, without a doubt. We also Black Rose as a level 7. What I noticed is that this format doesn't have that much great level 7 synchros. I mean, obviously the next best thing you could have as generic level 7 is Darkstrike Fighter. I don't think we want this card.
No.
uh, so yeah, other cards which are other level 7s which are very powerful, like Wyvern or Armor Master, more specific. So the next best thing you have is, I don't know, probably Fairy Dragon, which you summon with Debris Dragon most of the time. And then yeah, Stardust. We also have Stardust, um, which is a great card in a lot of situations, but not the
Yes,
best card to shotgun. Um, also, if
it's
you
awesome in this format. It's very powerful.
yeah, also if you run Starlight Road, you in those trap decks, you can summon this out. Then we got Scrap Dragon. I think this card is insane. This card is absolutely bonkers. Um,
Yes, crazy.
Something I miss in older formats, synchro formats um, without Duelist Revolution is Scrap Dragon. Card is insane. So many things you can do with it. Also the Scrap deck, where it can float. And then yeah, we also this card, a card, synchro card that was limited with the September 2011 bad list, um, together with Liberian and Formula Synchron, which is Trishula. So yeah, I think this is probably the most infamous synchro monster of this format. A lot of people have a lot of
Yep.
memories of this card. So yeah, uh, you think this is the best synchro of the format or Scrap Dragon?
Uh, um, I like Shushla a little bit more because it's just game ending most of the time. It almost reminds me of BLS in terms of power. Uh, it's just so crazy, but also it's just so cool. That's what I really love about this format is that you have all these amazing cards like Maxi, Veiler, BLS, Trishula,
Yeah,
and
that's true.
and Torgat and stuff. So you have all these. infamous and fucking crazy cards that I love. So 5D is at its finest, I guess.
Yeah, a lot of iconic cards, that's for sure. All right. So in the last card, we're gonna take a look at our Exceed monsters because this is the first format where you can play Exceeds. We're not going to talk about YCS Indianapolis. Um,
Yeah.
that's for sure. I mean, we got Gachi Gachi for agents, where you summon Venus, overlay Shine Balls, you have 2k beater instantly on the field. Leviathan, which is the main beat stick of the format. I mean, you got a bunch of different other exceeds as well, but those are like the main ones. Levier, a lot of combo potential, great card in general. And also Utopia, which is the main beta for the rank 4s, and Steelsworm Roach, which is especially for those high level decks like Karakuri or Agents, it's very important uh, to have this in the extra deck. So this card's not going to get summoned out a lot, but if it gets summoned, then it's the game is over most of the time if you can protect it. So
Yes.
yeah, this was a bit of a longer overview, but I think it was quite fun to take a look at the format before the tournament. So I'm excited. I'm so excited, Necro. I mean, you can hear that in my voice. Uh,
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
so it's going to be fun. I would, to be honest, I would like to play myself, but it's also going to be so fun to cast the tournament and see a bunch of crazy games. Uh, Maybe we're going to see some familiar faces from the Edison tournaments. I mean, I don't know. Hydropump is probably going to be in it, for example. And I really want to see what you can do with Darkwoods or with the Infernity deck. He did a lot of pro fights with it. Um, yeah, maybe from the format library tournament, we're going to see a couple of players. Um, Maybe we really hope we're going to see like a really crazy deck which we completely overlooked. Maybe some Dragon Turbo kind of type of strategy would be nice to see as well. So yeah, we really hope you get surprised, Necro. So you think there's going to be something? You think there's going to be something we're completely new we are going to see?
Probably Exodia Dragon Super Rejuvenation is win. Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll see.
I mean, as I played against it in the first round of the FL tournament, and it caught me by surprise. Contemporary Draco is a very powerful card against agents. So
You.
yeah, you have to consider that as well. So yeah, it was quite fun. Uh, I hope we see you guys on Saturday when the tournament is going to start. So if you like the video, like, share, and subscribe. If you're going to become a citizen of the Tengu Plant town and play in the tournament, join our Discord, link in the description. Um, this was the format overview for this tournament. Photo shooty out,
Bye bye.
and Necro as well. Bye bye.